Hello and welcome back to Title Sports Network. My name is Seb Parks. I'd like to be joined once again by Dan Rafael. And Dan, it's a short preview this one. 2 fights this weekend, 2 big fights this weekend. It's Janibek versus Mikhailovich, and it's Boots Ennis making his return at homecoming in Philadelphia. His first time out under the Eddie Hearn Matchroom banner. So let's start with that Janibek versus Mikhailovich card. Mikhailovich doesn't really have much on his record to go off. So how is this fight going to go? What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, man. I mean, Janibek Alimkhanuly is in a tough spot because he's a very good fighter, an Olympian, undefeated. He's the unified champion at middleweight, has the WBO belt, has the IBF belt, and the middleweight division is just not very strong right now. Top Rank's just in a real quandary about what to do with the guy. There's not a top name guy from 154 that wants to come up to fight him. Finding a top guy in the middleweight division has been rough. He's not ready to go to super middle, which even if he was, there's not a big fight for him when you've got one fighter holding all the belts and Canelo who's doing other things. So they just got to keep him going and try to find a reasonable opponent. So you look down those ratings and they come up with Andrei Mikhailovich. He's an undefeated fighter, as you mentioned, doesn't have any names on the record that would really be something that would open anybody's eyes. He's a Russian fighter based out of New Zealand, coming to Las Vegas to take on Janibek. And, who the heck knows? I mean, just because he's never fought anybody doesn't mean he's no good. We've seen plenty of guys come out of nowhere who we saw the same things. Just go back at the end of last year, we saw in the featherweight division, Rafael Espinoza from Mexico, an undefeated fighter that had fought absolutely nobody and comes and scores the big upset up against Robeisy Ramirez and takes the WBO featherweight title from him. So it's not like impossible, obviously. But Janibek has got a lot of people that think highly of him, even if he doesn't have a high profile. And I guess you just throw him in there and see what happens. If he wins, maybe they can make a unification fight. Maybe they can make an Adames fight potentially. It seems like Top Rank and PBC have been doing a little more business recently. Like they're trying to make the Lomachenko fight against Tank Davis. That's a big fight. So if they can do a big fight, why can't they do a little bit of a smaller fight? But in terms of that main event, look, in the United States anyway. It's an ESPN Plus only card. It's not even on the ESPN network. It's only available on the streaming part of the ESPN platform. And one thing about Janibek is at least he comes in there and he tries to knock you out. I mean, we've seen what he did. He did it with your boy Denzel Bentley. He knocked him out pretty easily. He's fought other fighters that he's knocked out pretty easily. The question is, can he do the same thing to this fighter in terms of Mikhailovich, who's, like I said, not a well-known guy. But anytime you're the unified middleweight champion, if you're a boxing fan, at least you should pay attention to it from the standpoint of the titles. It's just unfortunate he fights in a weight class that there's not a lot of big stuff happening. I mean, the reality is the biggest fights that were in that middleweight division were non-title fights that were like, say, on the 5-on-5 when you had Ammo Williams fighting Hamza Shiraz on the 5-on-5 card. That wasn't even a title fight. That was probably the highest profile middleweight fight we've seen in a little bit. So, Janibek can win. It's sort of just keep the chains moving. And if Mikhailovich wins, you might have a new name to look at in the weight class. Actually, if you want to know the truth, Seb, I'm actually a little more interested in the co-feature fight on that card.
I was just going to bring that up to you. Okay. Raymond Muratalla versus Tevin Farmer.
Yeah, so that's an interesting matchup. I mean, Muratalla is one of the best up-and-coming lightweights in boxing. Undefeated, fights out of the Robert Garcia gym, has been dying to get a big fight. Thought he might get an opportunity to fight against, a top name, put his name out there. He would have moved up in weight if necessary to fight Teofimo Lopez. Lopez camp, that was one of the names that they were offered. They didn't take that fight. They ended up going with the Claggett fight. So Muratalla has got a lot of people excited about him. Tevin Farmer has been off for a while, but Tevin Farmer at one time was one of the top 2 or 3 130-pounders in the world, had won a world title and was pretty active. Hasn't been as active in recent times, but he still poses a test, it seems, just because he's a very skillful fighter. And, there's not a lot of guys signing up to fight Raymond Muratalla. You got to make him the favorite, I guess. But this is the biggest name on Muratalla's record so far against a guy that has shown a really good boxing ability. He's got some losses, but he's an excellent boxer and a tenacious kind of fighter, a technical kind of fighter. And we'll see if Muratalla can, if again, the age, the freshness, the activity, it kind of goes, it makes me think a little bit about what happened in the Danny Jacobs fight that took place on that Masvidal Diaz card when he fought against Shane Mosley Jr., where it was one guy that was very inactive and a little bit older against a guy that was younger, fresher, more active. This has kind of rings a little bit like that to me, but you got to see how it plays out. But if Muratalla beats Tevin Farmer, as most people expect he will, he puts himself in a great position. He should be, on the cusp of getting a much bigger fight if he wins.
Yeah. So then let's look ahead then to the other fight over the weekend. It's Jarron Boots Ennis against David Avanesyan. I mean, that is a great fight in itself, but that wasn't the original fight, was it? So is this in any case a better fight than the original scheduled one?
I can't say it's a. First of all, I would never call this fight a great fight. Maybe you've been taking some promotional cues from Eddie, but it's not an unreasonable fight. There's a difference between a great fight and being like a reasonable defense for Jarron Ennis, which this is. So you made mention of the original opponent. So he was supposed to fight his mandatory challenger, Cody Crowley, an undefeated fighter who's made a series of very exciting fights, even if he's not a big puncher, but he's always been in, as you would call it over there in the UK, good old tear up. That's what that Cody Crowley has been. And he had an eye injury, a retina problem, and he was not medically cleared to do this fight. So he's unfortunately out. But they had enough time to get a new opponent. So they got David Avanesyan, a veteran. He's been in the ring with a lot of good fighters. He's probably known for two fights. Number one, he beat Shane Mosley Sr., sent him into retirement back several years ago. And he also had a situation where he had an opportunity to fight for world title against Terrence Crawford. This was in Terrence Crawford's fight before he fought Errol Spence, and Terrence Crawford flattened him. 6 rounds. He came to Omaha to fight Bud in his hometown and just got laid out in a very devastating knockout. So he's won one fight since then. Boots needed an opponent for the hometown fight in Philadelphia. That's going to be his first bout of his contract with Matchroom. He wasn't afraid to go to Omaha to fight Bud Crawford, so he's clearly got no issues going to Philadelphia to fight Boots Ennis. Obviously, they're on. Boots is making the first homecoming. Terrence had fought in Omaha, several times in the years. But it's a first defense with what happened against the mandatory taking place and dropping out. It's a reasonable fight. So when I look at it, I think to myself, okay, Boots is the huge favorite. Obviously, he's a tremendous talent. Can he knock him out quicker than Boots than Bud Crawford did? I don't think. I asked Boots about that when I spoke to him a few days ago. He didn't really seem to care about that. But for my purposes, I'm sort of like mildly interested. Can he take him out quicker? But they're going to have a huge crowd there. If you listen to what Eddie's been saying, they're going to have that building, in a huge crowd over, 12, 13,000 or whatever it's going to be. This is the big arena in Philadelphia. It's where their basketball team plays, their hockey team plays, the Wells Fargo Center. And there hasn't been a big title fight in Philadelphia in quite a while. And Boots is super excited to be fighting at home and establish himself as, the number one. I'm not saying this will establish himself, but a lot of people think he's the number one welterweight in a division that's kind of over the last little bit going through like a makeover, because you've got Crawford, who was undisputed. He's leaving the weight class to go up in weight. You had Errol Spence, who was the other guy who lost to Crawford, who's also going to be moving up in weight for his next fight. Manny Pacquiao is maybe coming out of retirement, but has not really been a factor at the welterweight division for a while. So you've got the new blood, so to speak, and Boots Ennis is one of those guys. You got Mario Barrios, who's got one of the belts, who might be fighting Pacquiao. But the point is, Stanionis with the WBA title. Those are sort of like the names there, and they're kind of jockeying for that position of who can establish themselves as number one. Boots has the chance to make his case, I guess, if he can look good against Avanesyan, a veteran, like I said, who's experienced, who knows how to handle himself. And hopefully this is the start of the Boots Matchroom relationship, where he can have this fight and then move on and get another bigger fight and stay active and fight not once a year, not twice a year, maybe even get him in the ring 3 times a year. That would be a great thing, even if he's not getting the biggest names available.
Yeah, I mean, Boots hasn't fought since it's a year ago, isn't it? It's almost a year, just over a year to the day that he last fought in Atlantic City. How do you see it going down? I mean, straightforward win for Boots. I
think that the term you like to use is someone's getting ironed out. And it's probably going to be David Avanesyan getting ironed out.
Do you know what? I think I quite like Avanesyan because he's fought so many times over here. He's fought on small hall shows. He's fought against some sort of up and coming British names. So I think I resonate with his name a little bit and just think, I like David Avanesyan. I think he's a good name. But maybe your side of the.
No, listen. I don't disrespect David Avanesyan whatsoever. I mean, he's shown himself to be a good quality professional with a have gloves will travel kind of mentality. This is not about like I don't think anything of him. It's just there, as they say, Seb, there are levels, and David Avanesyan is at one level, and he got the big win over Mosley when Mosley was totally finished, and he sent him off into retirement, and he had the stones to go to Omaha and to challenge Terrence Crawford for the world title, and he hung in there for a few rounds, and ultimately he got laid out. Boots Ennis is 27 years old, undefeated, big homecoming fight, first world title defense, has the whole world in front of him, has punching power, has speed, has defense, can do everything. And a lot of people think he's a generational kind of talent. And Avanesyan, no knock on him, but he's not that. And so if one guy's an A-level fighter and one guy's a B-level fighter or B-minus level fighter or maybe a C-plus fighter at this stage of his career, certainly anything on fight night can happen. But let's call it the preponderance of the evidence going into the fight would make you think that this should be Boots Ennis by a knockout. It's just a matter of how he gets to that point. And if he can't, then good for Avanesyan to do something that we didn't expect.
Excellent. Right, Dan. Well, we'll wrap that up there. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope everybody watching and listening has enjoyed the two shows this week. Dan and I will hopefully be back at some point next week to review the news and look ahead to next weekend. I believe it's Jake Paul versus Mike Perry.
Are you as excited as I am?
Oh, I'm so excited. So excited.
I do. Anyway.
Listen,
I in all seriousness, I look forward to seeing Jake fight just because it's.
I do. Yeah.
It's a big tent in boxing, so there's room for all that kind of stuff. And frankly, I'm also always excited when Amanda Serrano gets in the ring and she's on that card too.
Yeah, that's the great thing. I mean, I don't know. Weirdly, Amanda Serrano has me blocked on Twitter. I have no idea why, but I've met Amanda Serrano so many times, and she's such a lovely woman, and I really a big fan of hers. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing her in action. Hopefully, that'll tee up Katie Taylor for the back end of the year if that's still going to go ahead. But yeah, thanks for joining me, Dan. We'll wrap that up there. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below if you enjoyed our shows. And we will be back very soon. Catch you in a bit.